Now you've knit both sweater fronts to the point where it's time to start the crew neck shaping. We're here on the sweater, and we are right here on the pattern. First, I'm going to talk about exactly how many stitches you need to put in that front, and then the number of decreases you need to go along those edges. Then we're going to talk about exactly where you're going to put those decreases, because whether you put them right at the very edge or you move them in a couple of stitches, it really makes a difference to the look of your crew neck. Now we're going to put a collar over this one, so it doesn't really matter because it's going to be covered. But I want you to start thinking about how anytime you put a decrease or an increase in your fabric, you're not only shaping it, but you're also changing the surface texture of it. And finally, I'm going to show you how to do right and left-leaning decreases. But first, let's talk about crew neck shaping in general. This is not the only way to shape a crew neck, but it's simple and it's the way we're going to do it for this sweater. Basically, you take the number of stitches that you have in the back of the neck, you bind off half of them when you start the front of the neck or put them on a holder, and then you eliminate the rest of the stitches in that neck hole with every other row decreases and work the final part of that front shaping straight up until you have the same number of rows that you have in the back of the sweater. Now, in my case, I had 19 stitches in the back of the neck, and if I divide that in half, for my front neck shaping, I get 9.5 stitches. But obviously I cannot have 9.5 stitches, so will I round up to 10? No. If I do, that'll leave me with 9 stitches left, so I would have to put 4 on one side and 5 on the other, and I want them to be even. This shaping has to be even. So in other words, if this is an odd number, this has to be an odd number. So in my case, I'm going to make this 9, and that leaves me with 5 every other row decreases there, and 5 every other row decreases there. So I have my 9 front stitches, I get rid of 5 there, 5 there, 9 plus 10 is 19. It's perfect. Now, we need to redo these numbers a little bit because we don't have a straight front across here. Instead, what we did was bind off way down here for our placket. Here, let me get this out of the way because I can see it through there. Okay, so instead of the 9 stitches, we have 5 that we eliminated. There they are, way down there. And 5 plus 2 plus 2 equals our total 9. So we are going to bind off 2 there, and then continue with our regular 5 every other row decreases until we have our 19 stitches carved out of there. What kind of decreases shall we use, and where will we place them? And now we're going to take a trip back to 1992 when I taught this same concept in a video class called Sweater Finishing 101. We're doing this partly because it's a lot of fun for me to be able to stick it in here, but the other reason is I thought it was a pretty darn good piece of teaching. So I hope you enjoy this blast from the past.
What's important to your finishing here are these decreases. What kind of decreases should you use, and where exactly do you put them? Most sweater pieces for pullovers are symmetrical. That is, if you drew a line down the middle of the piece, the two sides would be mirror images of one another. Just as the shaping is mirror imaged, the increases and decreases should be mirror images of each other, or should lean in opposite directions. The bold line shows some places where you use increases or decreases. If the ones on this side lean to the left, the ones on this side should lean to the right. Same here. This edge leans to the left, and so do the decreases. I work the first 2 stitches in regular stocking knit stitch and work the decreases on the 3rd and 4th stitches. Notice the kind of line that's formed, a decorative ridge. Decreases are always more noticeable when they're moved in from the end 2 stitches of the knitting. In this sweater, the decreases lean in the direction opposite the edge. That makes the decreases look more straight up and down. I worked these in one stitch from the edge and put that stitch into the seam. I usually leave at least one plain stitch along an edge that needs to be seamed so that it's easy to sew. Sometimes you'll want a decorative line and sometimes not. You decide for each project, but it's important that you know how to make the decreases slant the way you want them to. The easier slant to make is the right-leaning slant. It's accomplished by a knit two together on the right side and a purl two together on the wrong side. A knit two together is exactly how it sounds. You simply insert as if to knit, just grabbing 2 stitches instead of 1, knit them off, and there you have your right-leaning decrease. Likewise, a purl two together means you simply insert as if to purl, but catch 2 this time instead of 1. And that's your right-leaning decrease when you work it from the wrong side. The 2 left-leaning decreases are worked a little differently. You have to slip the stitches before you work them together. And if you can remember S and L's, and everyone can these days, then you can remember that you need to slip the stitches of the left-leaning decreases. The first one is on the knit side, and it's called an SSK, or slip, slip, knit. You do exactly what the letters say. You slip one knitwise, slip a second one knitwise, insert the point of the left needle in the front sew, and simply knit them off. There's your left-leaning decrease. The SSK has become popular only about during the last 10 years. Patterns that are older than that might give you the instructions to slip one, knit one, pass over. Anytime you see that in a pattern, you may use that particular left-leaning decrease or substitute the SSK. I think you'll be pleased. The slip, slip, purl, or SSP, is the left-leaning decrease from the purl side. Again, begin by slipping 2 stitches knitwise, one at a time, then return these 2 stitches to the left needle, come around and back, insert your needle, sew, and simply purl them off. And you have a left-leaning decrease.
Welcome back to the future, which actually might be ancient history by the time you see this, but let's not get involved in that whiplash that you can get from time travel. Let's just go ahead. From that footage, you can see that you really have a lot of choices of where you can place your decreases and how that can affect the surface of the fabric as well as the shaping of the fabric. Now, if you would like to go ahead and experiment where you want to put those decreases, go ahead and do it. That's what this class is about. It's really a kind of primer where you're working on a sampler sweater. But if you feel that you'd like more guidance, I'll take you through it step by step the way I'm going to do those neckline decreases. On this very first row, I'm simply going to knit this side because I can't bind off those 2 stitches on this row, right? Because you can't bind off at the end of a row without leaving your tail over here, and I want to be working back and forth this way. I will go ahead and bind off my first 2 stitches there, knit across. Then I will purl back. And when I get here, I'm going to bind off, I'm purling, but I'm going to bind off those first 2 stitches and purl all the way back to the end. So notice I'm working both sides at once, but I am doing my bind offs on different rows. I'm singing, just singing in the rain. Okay, so here I am at the end of this first side, what would be the left side, and I'm not going to bind those off, but I'm going to bind off the first 2 stitches of this other side. These needles are kind of long and they're bouncing all over the place. So 1, 2, here's my bind off. I'll finish this row. I'm knitting in the rain, just knitting in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. My sticks, okay, turn it around. Okay, I've completed that row. Now I'm going to purl back. Here are my 2 little bound off stitches, see them? And when I get right here, I'm going to bind off those 2 stitches. If you have a ball of yarn, maybe 2 or 3, then you can go on YouTube and come knit with me. No, that's pretty bad. I finished that. There are my 2 bind off ones. Time to bind off on this side. There are only so many minutes of footage of my knitting that you, 1, 2, and I'll do my bind off nice and loose. 1, 2, there we go. And I'll finish purling this row. Once I get to the end of this row, I flip it around, whoops, and flip it out of the picture. And here we have it, my 2 little stitches in the front that have been bound off. Now notice, I am totally aware that these are on different rows, right? That they didn't happen on the same row because they couldn't happen on the same row. But believe me, this is not going to be a big deal when we finish the sweater up. Nobody is going to, what did my mother used to say? It cannot be seen by a man on a galloping horse. And although my mother was pretty much of a stickler of things, this is the kind of thing that she would let go. Okay, I have to do 5 every other row decreases. Technically, this isn't an every other row, but I've chosen to do all my neck edge decreases on a knit side row. And I've chosen to do them on the last 2 stitches, and I've chosen to have them lean in the direction of the slant that's going. So I'm going to do right hand decreases on this side, which are knit 2 together, and I'm going to do left hand decreases on this side, which I'm going to use SSK. You could do slip 1, knit 1, pass over, but for today I'll use SSK. And I only do it on the knit rows, and I only do it 5 times. And then I work straight until I have the same number of rows in the front of my sweater as I do in the back. I'll show you 1 set of decreases, and then I'll turn off the camera so that you can work this. And me too. And as we come up to the last 2 stitches on this side, which is actually the left side of the front, you are going to simply knit them together. This is another example of don't stop in the middle here, kids. I mean, you can look at it closely and count it, but it's so much easier if you complete an entire row on both sides. Then you know that you've got them even. Okay, again, we're going to do our decrease right at the very edge. We're going to slip 1, knitwise, slip 1, knitwise, insert that left needle front like that. So it looks like we're knitting, which of course is what we're doing. We're going to knit both of them together. And I'll finish off that row. This is what I would like you to do. I'd like you to figure out your own neck shaping, the number of stitches. You already know the number of stitches for the back of your neck, so how many do you need in the front of your neck? Let's see the one with the placket here. Okay, how many do you need to, you've got how many stitches here, how many stitches do you need to bind off on both of those places, how many every other row decreases do you need? Get yourself to a knit row, knit across the first side, bind off those little stitches that you need, knit all the way across, purl, bind off the stitches that you need, finish that purl row. Then on your next knit row, do a knit 2 together on this side, an SSK or slip 1, knit 1, pass over on this side, purl back, next knit row, do another decrease until you've completed all your decreases. Then I want you to work straight until you have the same number of rows in the entire front of the sweater as you do in the back. And when that's done, rejoin me.